Welcome to the Witchy Work Wishes podcast, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. Welcome to Witchy Work Wishes and another layer to our October theme of working in our thin veil. Today we are exploring our own personal history, or more exactly, how to figure out what it is. And I have a genealogy expert as a guest today who is going to help us dive deep into the world of our own ancestors. Whether you are looking to uncover hidden parts of your family history, maybe reconnect to your bloodline for spiritual reasons, or you know what, maybe just learn where you came from. I have Judy with me today, also known as my mom, who will be giving us practical tips and insights on how to trace our roots. I've mentioned before her deep history and expertise in genealogy work. She really has dedicated the past 20 years, honestly, it's probably more than that, but an extensive amount of time of her life working in it and also helping others on their journey. So she is the perfect addition and complement to help us today. But first, just some quick general housekeeping notes. I do want to let you know that the Witchy Work Wishes Shopify store is officially open. Yay! And phew. Oh my goodness, I did this shop myself, so don't laugh when you go take a peek at it. Oh my goodness, I'm not a graphic artist. This is my first time using this Shopify software, but you know what? I think it looks pretty good. At least for my first run at it. If you head over to the Witchy Work Wishes website, there is a tab that says Shopify. Click it and you are there. You do have to be 21 to enter, so you will get that quick prompt. But you know what? Oh my gosh, and I've already shipped some orders that have come in for the gummies. So thank you everyone, oh my gosh, who has sent me notes on your experience with them. I am honestly impressed with the product too. This has been a big project of mine that started, early springish, right, of this year. I did have an episode all about the gummies with a guest from the company who actually manufactured them. So if you are looking for some more information about the gummies, maybe before you want to purchase them, this is a great place to start. Just scroll back. It is episode number 99, Moon Phase Gummies. But I really, really appreciate the feedback. So a big thank you if you have ordered them, tried them, and sent me a note about them. I am just as impressed. So I'm loving this product. So the Shopify store does have other things in it, really more, those work type things, stuff that's going to support the working witch. So I have journals, coffee cups so we stay caffeinated. I have water bottles so we can stay hydrated, and then some little things for our desks. And I would love your support. This is a great way to help fund this actual podcast. I do not have sponsors yet. I am staying pretty firm in the quest of no commercials just because it bugs me so much when I'm listening to other podcasts and a commercial pops up. But I'm open. I'm definitely open to sponsorships for either a specific podcast or, a sponsorship for an entire month. But as of right now, the Witchy Work Wishes Shopify store is the sole funding source of this podcast. So hopefully soon, my Patreon account will also have a good base and help support this podcast too. This is a new venture for Witchy Work Wishes. And honestly, you guys, oh my gosh, my mind is flooded with ideas for it. I have posted some of the October information to all of the free members. And I just posted the first tier membership items on Sunday, which is, that monthly card draw and the early access to this podcast. So I am working on the downloadable worksheets as we speak, and I have started recording the third tier video for October. I should have all of that posted this coming weekend. So there's so much stuff that we can do together on Patreon. I am really, really excited to load content just for you. And then finally, oh my goodness, the contest is over. Yay! It was the big 100th episode celebration, and I have drawn the names, so I will be reaching out to the winners and then announce them, like a first name only type announcement, but we'll announce them in the next coming weeks, actually probably on next week's episode. But a huge thank you to everyone who participated, who shared the podcast, who commented in social media. Like, I loved reading everything. But most of all, just thank you. Thank you for participating. Okay, today's episode. It is all about tracing your ancestral roots with genealogy. It is a 2-part series, I don't know, maybe 3 if you count the dump supper episode at the end, but I will have a bunch of show notes in the post, so don't feel like you need to write everything down as we say it. We are going to review a bunch of websites to help support your research. And at the end, when I normally come back for the poem and the moon status, for today's episode, I am going to do a full, summarized recap of the steps too. So feel free just to listen. If you want to make notes, that's great, but I will have a summary for you in the closing portion of this podcast. All right, so let's go ahead and head over to it. This is a recording with my mom. Again, this is her area of specialty. She has not only documented our own personal family going back to the 1400s, and I know she's still working on more going back further, but she also helps others on their genealogical journey. So her wealth of knowledge, oh my gosh, you guys, it is unmistakable. And she will be a great asset for you today. All right, tracing your ancestral roots with genealogy. Okay, well, I am back, and I am so excited to have my mom with me today. Yay! This could not be a more perfect pairing for me with this topic today, just because it is my mom, and we are talking about our ancestry, our roots, our genealogy. This is it. It had to be with you, Mom.
Oh, thank you. What can I say?
All right, so we've got a pretty big layout for today, and I know my listeners are very curious about this. The month of October has a thinning veil, and it is typically, not only, but typically a big part of the year when our ancestors who have passed might try to start reaching out to us. So it really prompted me to want to do some back work for me and the listeners, where we can talk about our history, our genealogy, and tie into who might be trying to reach out to us right now. That's what you're here to help me with today. That's a lot.
I love it. It is a lot. Yes, indeed.
But this is your specialty. So I mentioned earlier in the intro that, gosh, you've been doing this for 20 more? Was it
over
more?
50 years.
No, 50?
Yeah, over 50 years.
Oh gosh, I think I said 20. Okay,
No,
so
well, that's okay.
not even close.
No, a long time.
It's been
a really long time.
Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, I say we get right into it, because more than likely...
I'm all over that.
All right, more than likely, I will be splitting this into 2 episodes so that the listeners can really absorb, maybe even do some work, and then come back for the second half and just kind of work along with us.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, right on.
It's a big undertaking.
It is.
It is.
This is a big one.
Yeah.
And I know for my listeners, it probably is not going to be the same pace or cadence that I normally have, just because there's so much data that we're going to be reviewing today, and it might feel like we're giving you a lot of homework, especially if this is something that piques your interest, that you've been trying to tackle in the past. But there's a lot to cover, so you want to just jump into it. Let's go.
Jump right in and go for it. Absolutely.
Okay. I say we start with the basics.
Okay.
What can we tell the listeners who maybe are not familiar with genealogy? Like, what is it, and why people might want to explore it?
Any number of reasons why people might want to. I think the basic one for most of us is just curiosity.
Right.
We know we're a product of our parents and our grandparents.
Right.
But unless we had the honor or have had a contact with great grandparents, which most of us don't.
Sure.
It's, it kind of stops with our grandparents. But when you start figuring out how many generations back, like I'm back 9 generations to the 1500s on a lot of our people,
that is crazy.
Of our own ancestry.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a question of, I think, kind of curiosity in that my mother's aunt, who lived near us in the same state here, found out that I was kind of interested. She had a
Sure.
lot of family pictures and things like that. And so she started sending them to me. And then it kind of piqued my curiosity about, well, who are these people?
Who is this?
I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't know who they were, but
Right.
they were people that she remembered within her lifespan. And so it just kind of took on a life of its own. And then I found out, because I was able to trace our lineage, our history back, it's called lineage, a ways. I was, all of a sudden, here I am back in the Revolutionary War period,
Right.
which proved to be eligibility in a lineal organization.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that kind of piqued my curiosity even further. But I think it's multifaceted. So I'm going to say curiosity is probably the main
For
thing
sure.
for most of us.
Right.
The other one, for legal reasons, people sometimes have to be able to prove if they were related to somebody, and that might
Sure.
spark their interest in a little bit. It's very personal.
It is.
It really is.
This is a personal journey.
Oh,
There's
it
no
is,
doubt.
and it's like a giant puzzle.
Yeah.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle. And you get one piece and you put it into the puzzle, and all of a sudden it starts taking shape.
Right.
And after a while, it kind of takes on a life of its own.
I can visualize that, much like a tree. And I know
Oh.
they use trees and the roots a lot
Oh, yeah.
or the branches a lot for genealogy pictures,
Yeah.
but I can see where you just start with like one little branch.
Oh yeah.
And all of a sudden that sparks off and branches off to 4 other branches and with
It
their own little
does.
branches. And then it's this massive rabbit hole that you're down and you're like, I'm in. Like I want to
Well,
go the distance.
If you look at I don't want to get too carried away
Yeah.
at this moment on
Yeah.
this, but we have our parents, and they have 2 parents, and each of those have 2 parents. Well, all of a sudden, you've got multiple generations, and you've got like 16 people added to a tree.
Right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate.
That's right.
Without a heck of a, I mean, records are pretty accessible going back at least for 2 or 3 generations. And so, yeah, it just becomes magical. And then you find out little things. You find out what kind of line of work they were in.
Yes.
And you find out a little history about them, just where they lived and how they moved and things like that. So
Right.
it takes on a life of its own. It's really, it's fascinating.
Okay, so more than likely, if we have somebody listening to us right now,
Yes, yeah.
it is because they have an interest in tracing their own ancestral roots through genealogy, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so I pulled a couple like general common reasons,
Okay.
just to kind of support what you were just saying. Certainly, discovering family history, right?
Right.
Curiosity about our origins, in that many are going to be honestly just simply curious
Yep.
about where their family came from, how their
Yep.
ancestors lived, just everything you were just saying. Tracing ancestry certainly can reveal stories about our family migration, the careers you just talked about, achievements, or
Absolutely.
honestly challenges that they went through too,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. And that's where history comes into all of this. History is a part of
It is.
of genealogy. I mean, that's kind of redundant, but depending on what was happening, flu epidemic, 1920, that hit the United States. We had grandparents or great grandparents
Yeah.
that we lost during that time period,
Right.
and people moved because of that too. There was areas that weren't suffering from it, so people would literally move to get away from a disease.
Sure. Yeah.
So these things all play into what our ancestors did.
Well, certainly that would probably help fill in some family gaps then maybe, right?
It
Like if
could
you
help.
like if your grandmother said, "Yes, I remember my grandmother did something, but I'm not exactly sure what happened." Like
Yeah.
you start digging in and going back to the city that she was born in and lived in, and that 85% of the people moved because of what you said, like the flu.
Absolutely.
That's where you could probably fill in some of those
Yeah.
gaps. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about using genealogy to build a sense of identity? What do you think about that?
I think it's huge.
It's a huge one, right?
It really is. We're a product of everybody that came before us.
We are.
I think right now on my tree, not all of it is documented.
Yeah.
I mean, but the majority of it is. I've got over 6,000 people going back in history. 6,000 people.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. Now, that's the bloodline. That doesn't include all the brothers. No, that does include the brothers and sisters, which some people don't get into that as much. I do, because I think that's important too, because what they did is almost as important as what the parents did.
Well, and I think that ties into, maybe using genealogy to connect to people's cultural and ethnic heritage, right?
Absolutely.
Especially if maybe they have potentially lost some cultural traditions over the years,
Yeah.
right? Or people who, the family members who are displaced from their ancestral homelands. That happens too.
And even something as small as characteristics, and I don't mean physical characteristics necessarily, but personality characteristics.
Yes.
Family members sometimes get lost, or family information isn't handed down from one generation to another, and you may wonder, gee, why do I find humor in everything that's
Right?
what's happening?
Yeah.
I'm like,
We'll laugh, yeah.
I laugh a lot.
Yeah.
And, but then when you go back and you start looking at your ancestry and you realize, man, they went through some really bad, rough times. And yet this trait was there with them as well.
Maybe they had to. That's how they had to
And
survive.
that's how they coped, probably.
Yeah, how they coped.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so definitely a reason to dive into genealogy could be a stronger sense of like self-identity, right? Of belonging.
Absolutely.
Okay. What do you think about using it to connect to ancestral traditions?
I think that's very important.
I've mentioned multiple times
Yeah.
the traditions that have been handed down, at least from my great-grandparents, possibly. So, maybe not great, but my grandparents.
Your great-grandparents.
So for the boys too, like some stuff has been handed down for generations, and I like that for sure.
Oh,
but
yeah.
if you didn't understand maybe why you do some of the things just naturally that weren't physically handed down or verbally told to you,
Right.
there might be some DNA coding, right? Of like,
Well,
hey,
there
this
could
is
be.
just your DNA remembers. It gets handed down.
It does. It does.
It just does.
Yeah. Sometimes, for some reason we can't even explain, something just strikes a chord with you that's happening around you. And you think, where did that come from? Why?
Exactly.
Why does that seem so meaningful to me? We don't know.
We don't know.
There may be something coded, as you said.
Right? DNA. I mean, that's the science side of it that I'm probably not going to be able to elaborate on, except for there's one part I definitely want to talk about as far as the maternal side of things that I know. We'll get into we'll get to it. Okay. What do you think about using genealogy as far as somebody, wanting to dive into this area for family health records?
Oh, that's huge.
Or family health history in general.
That's huge.
It's a biggie, right?
Absolutely huge. Most death records, I mean, it sounds morbid when you talk about this.
Death is a part of everything.
But it isn't.
It
is a part of life.
Yeah, it is.
Death records that were kept and have been kept for about the last, I'd say since 1850, pretty clearly denote cause of death on it. Huge factor. I mean, there could be multiple issues. Maybe only one is really highlighted on a death certificate.
Yeah.
But it gives you a really good marker that you can work with. Yeah, absolutely.
I just think especially maybe if somebody is adopted, right? Tapping into when they can some legal records where they can start doing this truly on their own. They won't have the great-grandparents stories that have been handed down. They are going on their own from ground zero, but it's definitely going to be giving them some insight about maybe some genetic predispositions.
Yeah, I think this is where DNA is this DNA wasn't around when I started doing it.
That's actually one of my...
It was, but I mean, the tests weren't available when I started doing this. DNA isn't a solve-all for everything, but on the other hand, it's amazing the information that they can do from that.
Well, we did our DNA testing, so I know not everybody is pro DNA testing, right? I get it.
I do too.
For privacy issues, but as far as hereditary conditions such as like heart disease, cancer, diabetes, even, right? That tracing through our DNA, I think that's going to just be invaluable insights.
Oh, I agree with you.
Especially if you're looking to have kids. You want those markers to hand down.
Well, and there's some things like, I mean, hey, I don't know how in depth you want to go with this. My mother had breast cancer.
Right.
And that was before they had the BRCA testing that they do now, which isn't DNA, but it's just medical in that realm. And then, of course, I got it.
Yep.
And so I was tested because I wanted to make sure that this wasn't something that our family
been
was
handed down,
passing
yeah,
down.
yeah.
I did not have it,
Right.
so I knew that I hadn't passed it to you.
Right.
And
knock on wood, I've not been
knock on
diagnosed
wood,
with.
yeah.
Unfortunately, and I don't have the right number in front of me. Maybe I'll try to pull that and then give it at the end when I do my poem and the moon stuff. But it's a pretty big statistic as far as women getting it. So even if you don't have the BRCA gene,
You can still get it.
it's like one in 5 women are going to get breast cancer.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
a huge high
And
number.
that is not related to BRCA.
No, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
No.
you're gonna get it. I mean, that
Yeah.
might not be the number, but I know it's a big number. When I saw it, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, I know.
No BRCA or anything. You still have a one in
But
whatever.
I mean, you've eliminated one form
For sure.
or one carrier, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. What about? Well, I kind of mentioned this one, but finding biological relatives. Certainly for somebody who has been adopted. Maybe that family reconnection, or if they've even lost touch, right? With
Well, that's where
biological.
DNA plays in.
That's no, for
Because
sure.
DNA, I mean, if you're, we don't have adoption in our family that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And so I've never had to deal with that.
Sure.
However, I do know that I have friends who have been adopted, and they're trying to do the research. Very difficult.
Is it?
But with DNA testing, you can positively, I mean, they can almost find out
It's
who
DNA.
your parents were. If
If-
those relatives have been tested
Right.
for DNA or had their DNA done. So yeah, it is possible to find out.
Yeah.
But it's just, the road's a little bumpier. It's a little more arduous.
But we're going to help them with that. We're giving everybody the tools today.
Yeah,
This is a big one.
absolutely.
Okay, what about using genealogy for maybe some personal connections to historical events? You briefly
that's
mentioned,
huge.
the Revolutionary War and
Yeah,
tying
yeah.
our lineage back to soldiers who fought in that. Do you find through your efforts in maybe helping other people that's a big one?
It's huge.
Yeah.
It is that, yeah. And the thing is, I mean, history is history. We can't rewrite it. What's happened in the past has happened. If you've got a relative that was born in the early 1800s, a male, more than likely he fought in the Civil War.
Yes.
And then you just start going backwards. Unfortunately, a lot of historical events are based on wars.
It's where, yeah.
But on the other hand, our family, I can trace back to pilgrims coming over in the early 1600s. So they were here during the colonization of our country.
Sure.
And so anything historical that was happening then, they were living it. Salem.
Right.
Late
Salem,
1600s.
Right. We know.
Yeah.
Well,
we were there.
We were there.
Our family was in Salem, Massachusetts during the witch trials.
Exactly. You even mentioned for anybody who is actively ready to watch the new season, Outlander.
Oh, the Outlander. Oh, gosh, yes.
You recently said that you can tie our relatives back to one of the wars there, right?
In Scotland.
Or one of the battles, yeah.
Oh,
In
absolutely.
Scotland.
Absolutely, I can.
That's crazy.
Well, my DNA is, you and I are fairly close on our
Scottish,
it's divided up
We are.
about ethnicity.
Yeah.
Mine is 38% Scottish,
Yeah.
so that's my highest percentage.
Mine too.
And yours is, I think,
Yeah.
was right there. So
Yeah.
I think that'll always be the same
Yeah.
for us. So obviously, we go back to Scotland.
Sure, for sure.
Heavily.
Yeah.
And it's it's the 1500s, 14, 15, 1600s.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
Okay, what else for some reasons why somebody might want to join today, listen today? What about citizenship and dual citizenship? Is that something that they would tap into genealogy for? Or maybe not really?
I mean, it would
might
be
be practical.
it would be helpful.
Practical reason, right?
Yeah, it's a practical reason, but it isn't necessary for citizenship.
You don't have to prove that you have. I think you do for Scotland.
Oh, do you?
I think some places you have to prove you have lineage back there if you want dual citizenship.
If you want it, well, that would make sense.
Right?
I guess that would make
Yeah.
sense.
I'm
Yes.
not sure about every country, but
Okay, I've never looked into this, so that I'm not familiar with this.
So I do think many countries allow for dual citizenship, or like that right of return program based on ancestral ties.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, another good reason.
Definitely I think for another reason, maybe someone's joining us today and listening could be some healing and emotional closure, right? Maybe individuals whose families were displaced, separated by historical events, like you were just saying, war, slavery even, maybe, or a forced migration.
Yeah.
Tracing ancestry can provide closure by reconnecting with lost family members and maybe even just learning about their fate, right?
Yeah.
That'll help heal some family trauma, understanding struggles or whatever trauma, right, was faced by our ancestors, such as the hardships you mentioned, persecution, even survival during tough times. I think that's all going to bring a sense of healing and personal understanding through the research that they can do.
I what comes to mind is, I don't know why this just popped into my brain, but the families that survived the Holocaust in Germany.
Yes.
So many of them were able to survive that. Were torn from their families and left behind everything that was familiar to them.
Right.
And they lost that connection. And so I think for some people, that would be a reason to do genealogy.
Absolutely.
Is to want to go back, to reconnect.
Yes.
And to maybe even find family members, extended family members. That's a big reason that a lot of people do genealogy, is to find a lost family member.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know this is a little side note, but I will never forget it was back when I was 14, like early 80s maybe. We did Anne Frank's on our trip to Germany. No, it wasn't. But her apartment wasn't in Germany. What was it?
It was in Denmark, I think it was.
Was it? Yeah.
I think it was Denmark.
But I remember how small that was.
Oh, it was a closet.
Climbing up the stairs to get into that little oh my gosh, that was. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad that was something you and Dad did for my brother and I. In that little side trip, but that was incredibly impactful.
Yeah. We get used to our lives, the way we live it every day. We wake up, we get up, we do our routines, and go to bed at night and get up in the morning and start it all over again. It's sometimes we lose sight of what other people maybe are having to go through,
right? And
we forget how blessed we are.
So that could be maybe something we talk about a little bit later, that when you start digging, you could find some stuff that's going to be really, really hard to read. You may not
want to know.
I know.
That's hard. Yeah, you might find things you don't want to know.
Let's touch base on that a little bit later.
We will.
We can provide the listeners with some tools of, hey, you start getting a rough patch. I mean, it is what it is. It happened.
It is what it is.
But here's some tools to maybe help get you through it. Or we'll talk about that too. All right, what about genetic heritage? I think we kind of touched that, but that's that DNA again, right?
It is the DNA again, and it's we're all linked. In humanity links us all, for one thing,
right?
But our DNA, you can't deny it. It's there. It's just a part of who we. It's a fact. That's exactly what it is.
People can trace their ancestry for obviously a wide amount of reasons, a wide range of reasons, from curiosity about their roots and their heritage to maybe exploring personal identity, certainly preserving the family stories, understanding health risks. I think that was a big one.
Right.
But also healing from past trauma. Like if a story got handed down that, hey, your great-great-grandmother was in the Holocaust, and you want to research it some more and figure out exactly who it was, that would, there could be some past trauma with that too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
All right. So we're in.
Okay.
Listeners are here. We know why we're here. Why we're doing this. How, this is so overwhelming. How in the world do we get started? If someone who's never looked into their family history, I don't even know. I don't even know what to ask you. Like, where do you start?
It's really.
Is it the last name? Is it just starting with? Is that?
No, it goes.
It's not. Okay.
A step.
That's too easy.
That. No. I'll make it easier.
Okay, well, please do.
If an individual is lucky enough to have living relatives.
Okay.
If your parents are still alive. If hopefully your grandparents are still alive. The main thing is to talk to them, ask them questions, write down the answers. I asked a few questions when I was younger, but didn't think I wasn't doing genealogy.
Why would you think document that? Yeah.
Why would I write it down?
Exactly.
I'm talking to my grandpa. I don't.
It's just talk.
It's just talk.
Yeah.
We were passing time. He gave me so much information. He and I were left at my folks' house. He come down for a visit. Everybody else went off to do something else. And Grandpop and I just sat there. His parents came over from Ireland, and he gave me family history. He just opened up a floodgate. And talked and talked and talked. Did I write it down? Of course not. Never occurred to me to do it.
Because for you, it
And
was
it was
just chit chat. Yeah.
Yeah,
We were just talking.
Bits and pieces
Yeah.
I remember. Anyway, I digress. The easiest way to get started, you start with yourself, obviously.
Okay.
I mean, that's a given.
This is it, yes.
More than likely, all of us have our own birth certificates. We may not.
Right. Some
And
people may not.
If you don't have it, I suggest very strongly that you get it, easy to do, from wherever you were born, from the Hall of Records in that location. Go back to your birth date, give them a phone call, write them a letter, say, I want a certified copy of my birth certificate.
Yes.
The birth certificate lists certain data. It lists both parents.
If both are to be listed. So
If
I know some single
sometimes
moms
they're not.
will not have.
Will not list a father.
They will not.
But
Yeah.
that's where DNA plays
There
in.
you go. Yeah.
Further
Later,
down the road.
Okay.
Okay. So you have that. If you want to do the same thing with both of your parents, you want to get copies of their birth certificates. I'm going to say this is crucial.
Okay.
I think in genealogy, depending on if you're doing it just for idle curiosity, you may not feel the need to document anything. I personally document everything that I can, because that's almost like proof positive.
Absolutely.
That this is my person. And if you're lucky enough to be able to get your parents' information, birth certificates, there again,
You've got two more.
you've got two more names.
Right.
Hopefully, you've
Yeah.
got their parents, your grandparents' names. Then what plays in?
Wait, can I ask a question?
It starts multiplying. Then.
I have a question for you.
Oh yes.
So back to this crucial step. So
Yes.
it sounds like birth certificates.
It's crucial.
It sounds like birth certificates are crucial.
For me, it is.
For sure. So you have your own.
Yes.
And if you do not have your own, you can go
You can
and
get
get a certified copy, right?
Absolutely.
Do you have that same?
You have to pay for it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have that a same? Can you get anybody's birth
Yes.
certificate?
Yes.
You can,
You
whether
don't
you're
have to
related.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
If you're willing to pay for it.
Yeah. Again, pay for it.
Any birth certificate that I've written for or asked for a copy of has been somebody in our lineage. I've never asked for somebody that
Who
wasn't.
isn't? Yeah.
There was no reason for me to.
But if you can't prove it, which is the whole reason you're doing all this stuff, like if you called up and if somebody wanted to get a copy of my birth certificate, if they had my basic information, could they figure it out and get a copy?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that for certain.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember times have changed.
I know they
When
have.
I first started doing this 50 plus years ago, there was no internet.
Right.
And so I literally had to write to
Literally.
Wisconsin or different states here
Yes.
to try and secure a birth certificate. I'm trying to remember if on my request, I may have said I'm trying to find my grandfather's
Something. Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
But I don't recall that they ever asked me to prove that I was related to them.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a good question, though. I don't know.
I guess in the fact that a birth certificate is public knowledge.
After a certain number of years, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe
I
maybe
think after 50 years,
it's
is.
public knowledge. Okay,
Yeah.
so then at that point, depending on how far back you're trying to go,
Yeah.
the world is yours. If you're willing to pay for
kinda
it,
is.
you're going to get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Now,
we
it may be different in another country.
that's fair. And I've got listeners in multiple different countries.
What's interesting is, I know we're going to get to this later, but
Yeah.
one of the resources I use is ancestry.com.
Yes.
And on my membership with that, I've expanded it to international because
You have to.
we go to Western Europe. So, I mean,
Yeah.
it's Scotland, Ireland, England,
Yep.
France a little bit.
Finland, we have Finland.
And Finland,
Let's
yes,
not forget
we do.
little
And we
Finland.
have Norway is
Yes,
in there
Norway.
too. We have some of the Scandinavian countries too.
Yeah.
And that's helpful. But when we start going back in time, there weren't records recorded like we're used to them being recorded here in the U.S. Back there, then you start relying on church records.
Yes.
Or sometimes, well, we'll get into that later.
Yes.
But yeah, it gets challenging sometimes. But to my knowledge, I think now you can
get
request
okay.
one. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds that's just key.
Yeah.
Get that in, and then you start going down the rabbit hole.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's almost like the base from which you do your research.
Absolutely. All right, so over the years, do you feel like there are common mistakes that you made as a beginner or that people in general tend to make as beginners when tracing their ancestry? And then follow up to that one, how potentially can they avoid them? Like, are there mistakes that you know you made?
Oh, absolutely.
That you wouldn't do it again?
Oh, my gosh.
You're like, no, okay.
Absolutely.
Any common ones that you can share?
I think one of the common ones at first that I did was, when I could start using a computer for part of the research, the first source that I used was ancestry.com.
Sure.
I think it's probably one of the most well-known resources that's out there, or it's been around the longest. Wonderful resource, invaluable. I use it
still today.
Yeah. But they have a feature which I think can be a pitfall for a lot of new people.
For sure.
Which is it's like a little green leaf will appear next to the name of one of your ancestors, which means that they've got a record or something. They've got information about your ancestor.
Okay.
Now, it may be a document, or it may be somebody else's family tree. And when I first was on, my very first time I went on, I went, oh my goodness.
There's a green leaf.
There's my aunt, and here's a whole nother tree already done about them. So I looked at the tree, and the names seemed the same, and there were all these dates and things, and I thought, this is
amazing.
Sliced bread.
Yeah.
This is fabulous.
Right.
And the tree is only as accurate as the person that's putting the information into it. And unfortunately, I accepted a lot of those as being factual, and they weren't. So you have to be careful. You really, really do. And something comes to mind as I'm saying that, which I'm going to embarrass you probably a little bit.
All good.
But back when you were maybe 7 or 8, your brother 2 years younger, so 5, 6, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I know we were out in the front yard and the mail came, and I was all excited. I went out to the mailbox.
So we're talking the 70s, just so my listeners can
we're talking in the 70s.
Put it in perspective. Like there's no internet yet.
Yeah, no internet yet. And I had written off for some information to prove an ancestor. And I got my response, and I was probably doing a happy dance on the front yard.
Literally in the front yard.
Embarrassing everybody.
Yeah.
But I was ecstatic. And your brother, I heard him say, "What's Mommy so excited about?" And your response, I don't know if you remember this.
No, I don't remember.
But your response was, "Oh, I think she found out about a dead person." And I thought, hey, She's right.
She's not lying.
She's not lying. I did find out something about a dead person, which is kind of funny when you think about it. But you know, when you're searching and you're working on, well, maybe, or a what if, or something like that, and then all of a sudden a document comes back that is proof positive that this person is your ancestor. It's kind of monumental.
Oh, I can't. Well, and plus, I mean, we're such an instant gratification society right now. Having to go back to the 70s where you put the stamp on the mail, you mailed it off, you had that buildup, that anticipation, and
you're at the mercy about how quick the people on the other end do anything.
It could be a long time.
It could be months. Yeah.
So I can only imagine getting something back after all that anticipation and just build up.
And usually it's when you start to forget about it.
Yeah, you're
not forget about it, but you not put it on your priority anymore because it's not here yet.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, then all of a sudden there it is in your hand.
And you got
it. It's huge. It's absolutely huge.
Okay, so big hiccup for somebody to potentially be aware of as far as common mistakes is if you are using one of the apps, be careful what information you accept that other people have filled in, right? Because it's only going to be, the information is only going to be as good as what that
I
user,
think, I think where the caution needs to come up are on other people's family trees.
Got you. Okay.
And almost all the websites, another wonderful website is called Family Search. It's part of the Mormon Church, the old part of the Mormon Church.
Yeah.
And there again, I was looking at that and found one of our relatives, but they had absolutely, I know for a fact, inaccurate information on my ancestors.
Because you can prove your stuff.
Oh, I can prove it.
You can prove yours.
And I knew that the information that was in their website was inaccurate, so I called them. Well, I kind of felt it was my obligation to.
Yeah,
and said, gee, I've got this same tree. I said, there's something that is so absolutely inaccurate. The parentage was completely wrong. It was people that raised them while the father was at war in the Civil War, but they weren't the parents.
Yeah.
They were caregivers.
Sure.
But this individual had shown them as being the parents. An easy mistake to make.
For sure.
However, inaccurate. And the people that I was talking with said, all you can do is to bring it to their attention. Make it accurate in they can't change somebody else's tree.
Boy, and you're touching probably on a very sensitive subject in that who raised you, you might have the emotional tie with, and call them your mother, call them your father, or, like, this is my parent. The fact that my bloodline goes a different way, that's a tough one. But that's what
tough.
But genealogy is
that's
about.
What it is. It's bloodline.
It's your bloodline.
I think we've all had relatives that have been in a big part of our lives. And they are blood related, but they're not parent. It's not a parent.
That's it. Yeah.
And, a lot of people are raised by their grandparents.
For sure.
That is a bloodline.
Yeah.
But
they're not your parents.
In this case, this was just a lovely family that had offered to take care of the three children.
While the war was on.
The mom had passed away and while the dad was at war.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Okay, so you just mentioned some tools. So let's go ahead and jump into that.
Okay.
Some tools and resources. I know there are a bunch of websites.
There's so many.
If it's okay, I was just going to kind of go down them and then get your opinion on each one.
I was just going to say, it's very personal. While I might like one resource completely and think it's absolutely wonderful, somebody else might not like it.
Yeah.
So you might need to try out 2 or 3 and find one that you're comfortable with.
Sure.
Yeah.
And do you feel like again, everybody find their resource that they like for tracing their family history,
Right.
But are there any ones that we'll find out. I'll just ask you, is that okay? I'll just
sure.
go down.
Yeah, go
so
down
I
the
grabbed
list.
as many that I could off the list.
Okay.
That I found, and then I would love to get your opinion on them. And for anybody listening, what I will do is I will list all of these out in the show notes. So if one piques your interest, you don't have to write them down in a fast fury right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so first one, ancestry.com.
Love it.
Okay, that one literally seems to be the largest genealogy website from the ones that I was looking at, with literally billions of records, including like there's census data, there's birth, marriage,
there's
death.
everything.
Yeah, okay.
There's wills, land records,
Immigration records.
stories, histories.
Okay.
It's one of, and it was one of the first ones. And not that means it's one of the best.
For sure.
But they've been around. They know what they're doing.
They do.
It's a good resource.
So it looks like for Ancestry.com, the regions covered it's worldwide. This
worldwide.
one is worldwide. It does a focus on the U.S., Europe, and parts of Asia, I believe, but it is a worldwide website.
Correct.
Tool based.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, second one I found was FamilySearch.org, which you happened to mention when you
Another
were just...
good one.
Okay.
Another really good one.
This one's actually free. This one
Yes,
is a
it
free
is.
genealogy website. Ancestry.com, you guys, is not.
Membership.
There is a membership. You pay to get the extensive knowledge that is built in there.
Well, the other thing is that they are constantly updating.
Yes.
Where just recently I found a relative that I've been looking for probably 15 years. But because new things are being digitalized all the time, new information was put in.
Right.
And so all of a sudden there's my ancestor.
So, okay, so which I love. And that makes it worth it.
Yeah.
That's why you pay to be a member on that one.
It is.
Okay, so familysearch.org, again, it's a free genealogy website. It's run by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, It has extensive records, including, I believe, vital records, census records, certainly some church archives, but it also has a large collection of user-generated family trees, which was the problem that you ran into.
That I ran into.
It's okay.
Yeah.
So this one does happen to be a global coverage as far as genealogy, though. Okay, what about myheritage.com?
I think it's good.
You like that one too?
I like it.
Okay.
I still use that today.
So it's similar to ancestry.com, right?
Yeah. And it's a membership.
Oh, it is? Okay.
It is, yeah.
Okay. It definitely, I think, is known for its European records, if I'm not mistaken. It's definitely global, but strong European records.
Correct.
Okay. What about findmypast.com? Have you ever used that one?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
I'll have to be very honest.
Okay, so this one is a genealogy service that's focused really on British, Irish, and U.S. records.
Okay.
I think it will pull things like, British newspaper archives, parish records, and military records. Mm-hmm. So the regions covered here are going to be the UK, Ireland, a little bit of the U.S., Australia, and New Zealand. So another tool for somebody.
Another tool, absolutely.
All right, what about genealogy?
I am familiar with it. It's not one that I use a great deal. Mm-hmm. I tend to use the first three that we mentioned more than the others. But I do go into it occasionally.
Okay. Again, you might have something that the other ones just don't have, right?
And you never know. That's just the point.
Yeah.
The other thing is that with a lot of these, even though they may be membership ones, they usually have like a 30-day free trial or something like that associated with it. So that if you're looking for one specific thing, you can go in on the free trial.
For sure.
That is
a great tip.
And try and look for it.
That's a great tip, Mom.
Yeah.
Okay, so genealogybank.com. This one mainly is going to focus on, I think, historical newspapers, newspaper articles in the U.S., but it also provides some vital record information, obituaries, maybe some U.S. government documents that can certainly help.
And this is good when you're getting started. Mm-hmm. For me, so much of my research now is before newspapers were printed.
Mm-hmm. So you're long past all this.
So for me, there's still cases where it can be helpful, but when you're getting started, I think something like that is wonderful.
I love it. Okay, then the last one that I was able to pull for website stuff is called genie.com. Mm-hmm. Do you know that one?
I am aware of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this one I have listed as a collaborative family tree kind of building platform where users can connect with distant relatives and maybe, work together to build a shared family tree, kind of a collaborative type.
I think that's very accurate.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so all right, let's do the controversial topic.
Oh dear.
To DNA test or not DNA test? I mean, we did,
and for me, I had no trouble making that decision. Okay. A lot of people think it's an invasion of their privacy,
which I get.
It's very, and I do get that.
I totally
too.
understand.
It's very personal, but it opens you. I mean, they found a cousin that I would never have. I mean, a couple times removed,
sure,
but would never have known that I had. Literally, would never have known it.
Right.
And we have been in contact recently, but we were in contact for a while. And that's kind of a cool thing. But it opens up so much information to you. I personally think DNA testing is a good thing.
So I did it, as you know. Yeah. I did it for both of my boys, as you know. That was a big thing. That was kind of like our theme for this past Yule and Christmas. It was fun.
It was really fun.
It was just so personal choice here. If you are looking for DNA testing, if this is part of the genealogy work that you want to do, there's 3 that I pulled that are available. First one, which I think has the most commercials probably, at least on TV, is 23andMe, right? That's a big one that a lot of people know. 23andMe provides DNA testing with a focus on genetic health reports. So it includes like ethnic breakdowns and, like finding DNA relatives. The region's covered, it's global. So it is worldwide. So the other one, which is the one that we used, right, was Ancestry DNA, which is it's specifically offered through Ancestry.com. So it's not part of your membership with Ancestry.com.
No, it's an extra.
You have to pay extra for it, but it's amazing that it ties right into that tree that you have going there. So
and it's constantly updated.
Getting updated, yeah.
It isn't like they do it once and they give you the results. As more and more people submit DNA testing for DNA, their database expands, and that's where like our ethnicity, as far as being the percentage of
Scottish,
and all of
that.
Yeah. It changed. Originally, it was Great Britain was my highest number, but as more and more people were tested, then they found. I mean, they can tell you who you came from,
right?
Yeah.
But then I have one that I haven't heard of before, but it's called Living DNA.
I don't know that one either.
So this is known for its breakdown more of the British and Irish ancestry.
Okay,
so it might be more specific over there. But Living DNA provides users with region-specific information and DNA matching.
Love it.
Again, global, but it seems to be more focused on British and maybe Irish ancestry.
I think no matter where you are in the world, there is some form of DNA testing that is available. Now, if it's not immediately within walking distance, let's say, I mean, you can mail things. Yeah. And it's accessible for everybody.
Everything's now. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we've got our websites.
Okay.
We have either you're going to do DNA testing or you're not going to do
DNA.
Or you're on the fence.
You don't have to.
You'll decide later. Yep.
Yeah.
So what about region-specific genealogy resources? Like if you need to focus on British and Irish records, right? We've got the National Archives. That's in the UK. That offers access to British military, immigration, census records. I think there's a website called scotlandspeople.gov.uk.
Okay.
That is a Scottish government website specific for researching Scottish ancestry. I say that because we're there.
Yes.
Ancestry, with access to census data over there, their church records, their wills that are documented in Scotland. There's also Irish Genealogy.ie, which I'm not sure what that ending is, but this provides free access to civil records like birth, marriages, deaths, as well as church records that are primarily for Ireland.
Okay. Yeah.
Just more avenues, right? If you want to keep researching more areas.
I'll tell you one that I should have included up above when we were talking about the different resources. One that's really important is your local genealogical society.
Oh, sure.
More often than not, they have libraries associated with them. And they are wonderful, wonderful resources for getting information.
Just like
not only local, but for international.
The detail, yeah.
Yeah. They would, in fact, they might even have actual books within their library, or through their computers can link you almost instantly with one in Ireland or Scotland.
So remind me to say that again at the end, because I'm a big one, and there's no need to recreate the wheel.
No, there isn't.
You are not in this alone. But I'm gonna go through some of these specific websites.
And it is overwhelming.
It has. This is
I'm just thinking as we're talking. Oh my gosh! Anybody listening to this is probably thinking, do I really want
no, forget it. I don't care.
I don't think I want to know. I mean, it really, once you get into it, all this nitty gritty just kind of fades away, and you just do things.
Yeah,
it is overwhelming.
Let's remind everybody though to go to look for somebody local, because they will get you on the right path.
Absolutely.
For sure. If you have Jewish ancestry, there is jewishgen.org.
Okay.
This is a database specific to that Jewish genealogy area. It's going to include the Holocaust records.
Okay.
And different information specific to that line.
Absolutely.
African American, there's a site called AfriGeneas. It's AfriGeneas.com. This is a resource specifically for African American genealogy research. It's going to have access to slave records, Freedmen's Bureau records, and other forums for, for sharing information for sure. So the Freedmen's Bureau records, I think that actually might pop up on Family Search. It's an important research of information for African American ancestry.
Okay.
Certainly those who are going to be tracing ancestors after the Civil War, I think.
Right. Record keeping prior to that was
could be a little
sketchy.
Yeah, a little sketchy. Especially if you are coming from slave history or
exactly.
Okay, indigenous people, right?
Yep.
Of the Americans, of the Americas. Genealogy.com, I think, is a good one. This provides, I think, free genealogy with a strong focus on Native American records, including tribal rolls and treaties. Definitely the Bureau of Indian Affairs,
right.
the BIA. I think most people are familiar with that one, but there's also tribal information in BIA as well. Okay, for Eastern European genealogy, I was able to pull 3 of them. First one being PolishRoots.org. This site is a comprehensive resource for those researching Polish ancestry, including church records, immigration documents, and surname research. There's another one called the Central State Historical Archives of Ukraine. That one provides resources for those tracing, ancestry in Ukraine. And then Jewish records indexing. Poland has that. This can be an essential tool for those of Polish Jewish ancestry with index records such as, the birth, the marriage, and of course the death records. But there's also a specific one for Latin America. For that genealogy, a good source is going to be mexicangenealogy.info. Again, tracing the Mexican ancestry with access to parish records and, user-submitted genealogical information. But I believe there's one, a Brazil genealogy group. They offer resources specific to, again, the Brazilian ancestry research. And then I also pulled Asian ancestry. There's one called ChineseAncestry.com. This provides resources for those researching Chinese family history, including Chinese clan genealogy books and immigration records. I believe there's also one called JapanGenWeb.org. This is going to be specific for Japanese ancestry, including local registries and family records. And then there's, I think on the Family Search site, there's Korean Genealogy Guide, which is more of an introduction, I believe, to tracing Korean ancestry through local family registries. They'll kind of give you some hits and guides and those historical records. So again, I'm going to list all of these out because who knows who's listening, what path they need to go down.
Exactly.
Or might not,
somebody will take something from it.
There's going to be something, but you might not know too. Like, right, you start, just like you said, you start with a birth certificate and you branch out.
And you go from there.
And then 4 branches down, you might be like, well, apparently I need to be looking over in the PolishRoots.org website, right? Who knew?
Yeah.
It creates a rabbit hole.
The other thing I want to mention too, sometime our census records, hugely important. Census, how important they are.
And where do you find those?
On Ancestry.
Ancestry.com.
Family Search, any of them, you can get census records on there. Hugely important.
One. Okay.
After a certain point, before 1850, this is just for your information.
Oh, if I need it, everybody needs it.
Okay. If the information on a census report before 1850 were tally marks, which is how many people were living in a household, how many under the age of 10 and over the age of 2. And so they broke it down, but you don't know who those people were. There were no names. Only the name of the man was listed.
Sure, yeah.
But after 1850, here in the United States, they started listing them with the husband and the wife, giving the names of all the people living in that household.
Even the children names?
Even the children's names. And it would give place of birth. And so, depending on who was giving the information to the census taker, they could be wrong. But, that might say, well, where were your parents born? Maybe the census was being taken in, let's say, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And, where were your parents born? And then the man might have said, well, my dad was born in Scotland, but my mother was born in England.
Sure.
Or, was born in the United States.
Right.
Something. So it varies, but that gives you another clue.
There's
so
another,
if you're going back one more generation, oh my gosh, now I need to look in Scotland for that relative, because they weren't even born here in this country.
Well, you're leading me right into my next set of questions, Mom.
How clever of me.
So that actually does it. So I wanted to ask you about specialty. So I mean, the websites are great, right? This is where you start.
Wonderful.
You start with your birth certificate.
Yeah.
Then you start going down the rabbit hole. But what about specialty and historical records? Ellis Island, I know that's a big one, right? The Ellis Island database. So for the listeners, if you're not familiar, this is a free resource for tracing ancestors who immigrated to the U.S. through not everybody came through Ellis Island, right? But they had to immigrate
at a specific time.
So it's going to cover immigration with a focus on the late 19th to early 20th century arrivals.
Correct.
So is this one that you would recommend? Ellis Island again?
Well,
yeah.
Each family is different.
For sure.
And we had 2 relatives at that time point that came to the U.S., but they didn't come through Ellis Island, either one of them.
Right.
Everybody else came 100 or plus years before that, 200 years almost before that. And so Ellis Island for me was not a resource that I was
for us, for our lines,
for our particular family. But for a lot of people it is. But there again with Ellis Island, any information that's taken down through one of these ports of entry is only as accurate as the person that's taking down the information. Now you have to realize that a lot of these immigrants that were coming in couldn't maybe even speak English at all, some of them, or if at best it was broken.
Right.
So they would ask them their name, and the person taking the information would write down what they heard.
Phonetically.
So it was spelled phonetically. It might not have been anything close to what their last name actually was. But they did the best that they could under the circumstances.
Well, that makes it extremely difficult then. What do you do?
The records are sketchy.
They're sketchy. Ellis Island sketchy.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. I'm not saying they're not accurate. I think it's a wonderful trove of information.
Yeah.
But you have to be really willing to sift through it.
Okay, and so maybe if you truly hit if that does take you, your search takes you to Ellis Island, maybe you do start sounding it out.
Oh yeah.
And then saying, what could that be?
How else could it be spelled?
With knowing what we know now, right? And then that's a tough one.
I had one family in our history where the wife's maiden name was DeBron, and they spelled it on a death certificate as Debron, which is kind of phonetically. So whoever wrote the information,
DeBron,
probably spelled it that way. But her last name was actually Deberon. It was Deberan. Not even close.
Spelling wise, not
but
even
it
close.
Sounds very similar.
And when you have 400 people lined up to get through some type of immigration process, okay, fine, that's close enough. Let's go. Just get
next.
Let's go next. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right.
So how did you figure it out?
What? Just through research. The name kept coming up, and then I started looking at thinking like you were just saying, you have to look at all the possible spellings, and I wrote down phonetically how could I spell this?
Yes.
And so I had about 10 different things that some of them were a stretch.
Which is what you have to do, right?
But I did, and it really, all of a sudden, it opened up that whole line eventually for me, which I had nothing on. Now I've got them back in England already.
Oh, that's crazy.
So yeah, it is goofy. But you just have to be willing to put the work in.
What about Cindy's List? Have you ever used that?
I don't know that
You don't know that one? Okay, so that came up as an option as a comprehensive directory of genealogy websites.
Oh.
So it's you can go there to find.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, that sounds like it would be a good thing. It's one place to go where you get a whole lot.
Right, lots of suggestions.
Fold 3 is outstanding. Oh.
Okay, fold. Okay, so next is fold 3.
I'm so sorry about that.
Mom read ahead to my notes. So fold3.com. What do you know?
Oh.
What do you know about that one?
Fold 3 is wonderful.
That's a good one. Okay.
It's military.
This is your military
It's
records.
military.
Yeah.
We've done outstanding job of record keeping in this country as far as that goes.
Yeah.
And
military documents.
Military documents.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So I recommend it highly.
Yeah.
If you know what, there's a chance you may have a relative that going back, you may have no relatives that served in the military.
Yeah.
It is possible. Well, some of them religion-based. Quakers
Sure.
didn't believe in fighting or killing.
Right.
So you will find them on many military roles,
Right.
unless they were providing food, livestock back in the early years
Sure.
to the war effort.
Yeah.
For sometimes people aren't involved in the military, but the majority of us, in some way or another,
Somebody,
has been affected
someone,
by it.
some along the line.
Someone along the line has been. Yeah.
Okay, so fold 3, is it only military records or is it?
It is.
It's, oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
At least my experience with it has been only military.
Okay, so local archives and libraries.
Wonderful
You mentioned
resource.
this one. I
Yeah.
want to make sure that everybody knows that there is no reason. I mean, some of this it's just you're gonna have to grind it out, right?
Go to your
But
local library.
go local, yeah.
I mean, just your local public library.
Literally, yeah.
Talk to the librarian there, and you'll come up with something. I'm sure. Local genealogical societies, I recommend very highly. Almost always they have a library
Sure.
of some sort, but wonderful people that can help you with your research.
And they know.
They know.
It's just like what you're saying. They're, if you ask them a question, they're going to give you a 10-minute answer because they've already done the research. They've had their own hiccups and
Exactly.
all the stuff. I love it.
Exactly.
This is perfect.
I might give you one more resource that you don't have on your list here, but I think is wonderful.
What do you? Okay.
It's called Find a Grave.
Find a grave. Okay.
Yeah, .com.
Okay. Findagrave.com.
It's very simple. Death records and grave records are huge as far as getting information.
Okay.
Now, not everybody's there.
For sure. Yeah.
Only the cemeteries that they've been to.
Or if your grandparents were buried in the backyard, they're not going to be on a.
Well, and that unfortunately is the
That
case
happens.
for one of our sets of great grandparents.
Yeah.
Back. The mother and daughter both died in 1802, a month apart.
Oh.
And they were both buried on the family farm.
Sure.
So there's no record. Even the church record doesn't show them, which I find surprising.
interesting, yeah.
Or the mother, and this is the mother. I can't figure out her last name.
Yeah.
But Find a Grave.
Okay. Findagrave.com.
Find a Grave is wonderful. In going on to that, if they have your ancestor there, sometimes you can click on a little picture and it'll take you to the actual inscriptions on the gravestone and any information that they have acquired about that
be
person.
amazing.
Sometimes parents are listed. All of their children are listed sometimes. A wife, sometimes multiple wives
Sure, yeah.
are listed.
If they got remarried,
if
if the wife- somebody got remarried.
that's there. And quite often, if you find a husband, let's say, with all this information, and his wife is listed, you click on her name and her gravestone comes up and it has her parents and everything. Now, that's ideal. It doesn't always
For
work
sure.
that way. Sometimes it's just a gravestone and they don't know.
Is it only gravestones? Like, what if somebody was cremated? There's no gravestone to.
There's no grave. Well, there's a plaque, I think.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So there still could be information even
There
if
still
somebody
could be
wasn't
information.
buried and there isn't a
Absolutely.
grave. Okay.
But Find a Grave comes in really, I mean, I have found Find a Graves for people back in the 1600s. If there's a graveyard
Yeah.
and some individual person like you or me has gone to that graveyard
Yeah.
and has written down
Documented
I mean,
it.
this could be an old graveyard that isn't even active anymore. It's
Yes.
just, it's there. And then taken pictures and submitted it to them. So these are good
How
Samaritans
amazing.
that are just stepping up
Yes.
and making sure that this information doesn't get lost.
I
which
love
is
that.
huge.
I love
do
that
too.
because there could be a tiny little just family graveyard, right? Really, that really is just for that farm's
Well, this is just it.
grandparents, great grandparents. Like
Yeah.
this is if you pass,
And
you're
that's
going to
what
be.
people did. They,
yeah.
I mean, they wanted to keep their relatives close to them.
Absolutely.
And they didn't want them. Depending, a lot of them went to the church. I mean, I think that was probably the first choice. But if you were in a rural farm, which let's face it, most of our ancestors were farmers for everybody in this country. I mean,
Absolutely. That's what we did.
those were the people that came over.
That's right. Yeah.
And you were fortunate enough to, let's say, put in an apprenticeship somewhere, and you were able to buy your own land. Maybe you had 10, 15 acres, or I mean, it
Yes.
doesn't sound like much, but it could be way more. But
Yeah.
if you did that, that was everything. That was your world, and
That is your name. That is your family heritage.
it's everything.
Absolutely.
And so if someone passed, especially the owners or the originators of the land and farming it, yeah, they would have been buried right there on the land. They wouldn't have been buried.
So that's a
in
great
church.
resource to add.
Oh,
Thank you.
absolutely.
That's perfect.
Yeah, find a grave. It's wonderful.
Okay, so this is a lot of information, and we are coming up to an hour right now, just with this.
Oh,
So this is a really good time to break.
okay.
I was going to kind of quickly recap what we discussed, and then next week's episode, I would love to talk about maybe exploring our lineage for spiritual practices,
Oh,
and
I like
kind of
that.
tying that stuff in, especially since it is the month of October.
Absolutely.
I've already let the listeners know that you and I are going to be doing a dumb supper.
Oh, I can hardly wait.
I know. I'm literally so excited. But I think if we break it now and then do the spiritual side of it next week when we talk about the dumb suppers, in addition to it,
Perfect.
it's going to give everybody a nice little break.
Yeah.
And kind of tie it all together. So how do we recap this? Oh my gosh, this was a lot.
I'm just thinking.
Start with the birth certificate.
Well, I think to begin with, I would almost like to say it's baby steps.
I like that.
You don't have to jump in and expect to go back 5 or 6 generations
In one
the first
sitting.
time.
Yeah.
It won't happen.
That's right.
It really won't.
Yeah.
And time permitting, and you being willing to do how much work you want to put into this, you get a lot of information pretty quickly with the internet these days.
You do.
The resources that you've mentioned are wonderful tools.
Yes.
And and to be patient and have fun with it. It isn't supposed to be a job or a task.
Right.
It should be fun. It's a discovery.
You're unlocking your DNA.
You're not only your DNA, but you're unlocking your family history.
Yes.
You are part of history.
These are your people.
Yeah. And to think that our families and our relatives lived through so many things that we read about or have read about in school books, they were there.
Right.
And case in point, I always go back to Salem. I don't know why I do that, but
it was significant. Salem was so...
That was really unfortunate time. Well, we've had several unfortunate times. But to know that we had... I can go to my chart and show you the relatives, families that we had that were living in Salem at that time.
Yeah. I love it.
It's bizarre.
It
comes alive.
It comes alive. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's good advice to baby step it. I like that.
Baby steps, absolutely.
However, you do want to start with a birth certificate.
Yes, you do.
Even if it's
crucial.
Your birth certificate.
Absolutely, it's crucial.
Step 1, birth certificate.
Yes, it's absolutely crucial.
You start with a birth certificate.
Okay.
From there, if depending on what data is filled in for you, you can then go and you just start going one by one,
right?
Almost
as equally important as your own birth certificate, which all of us should have that. I think
for sure.
you need it if you're going to apply for a passport or anything.
Yes.
So,
yes.
That's something that everybody should have. I think to have it for both of your parents is also crucial.
Yes.
From there, you've got a working base.
Yeah.
With those 3.
I can say, and this is a completely side note, but if you have your actual birth certificate, I know a lot of people want to do their chart with astrology, right?
Absolutely. Oh, yes.
So this is a big one. You need, can you do it by just a location and a date? You can. But if you want to look at planets where they were specifically when you were born, in the location that you were born, you need that timestamp.
Yeah.
So you need the actual place, even if you were from a different state. If you were born somewhere else at that date, that's it. That's your timestamp of where the planets were at that moment.
At that exact moment.
Where the moon was, the whole thing. So, so for other reasons too, certainly genealogy, but if you're looking to do your chart too, your astrological chart.
It's a valuable tool.
It is.
Very definitely.
Really is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got birth certificates, and then from there, start going into the websites that we listed, right? And again, I'll list them all out again. But.
And keep records.
Yes.
It's really important. Okay, there's one more a resource, if you will.
Yeah.
When I first started doing genealogy, I went to Ancestral because that was the only thing there.
Sure.
They had a I'm trying to think what it should be called. They had another company that was connected to them where you could keep your tree on Ancestry. You could build it and work it on Ancestry.
Sure.
But then they developed another company that you could also build your tree on that was separate from Ancestry, but would have access.
Like tie it in or something?
It kind of morphed over the years.
Oh.
And I chose to do that. So I've got my tree growing, if you will, on Ancestry and on their subsidiary, which it's called Family Tree Maker.
Oh, okay, yeah.
With that scenario, that Family Tree Maker is private. I've kept my trees private. I just like to do that.
No, I agree.
But with Family Tree Maker, I've got it linked to my tree on Ancestry. So if I make a bunch of changes and have done some research and oh my gosh, this is different, blah blah blah, I can then link and activate that the two trees be linked. And so it just does it. I have to push a few buttons and it just does it for me. So that all of a sudden,
I love technology.
Yeah. Then all of a sudden I know that my tree that I'm working on, if you or the boys want to see my tree, because you're linked to it.
Yeah.
It's updated and you've got the newest information then that's on that tree. So these are tools that I think are really useful. I think to get started, somebody could go to like Family Tree Maker, not Family Tree Maker, to Family Search, which is the Mormon church site, or Ancestry, those two, I would say, maybe MyHeritage, and build their trees right there, right on that website.
Okay.
But aside from them doing that, it's important that you keep any documentation that you acquire organized, because you will develop paperwork.
Well, you can do PDF. You don't have to print. You can save it as a PDF on your computer. So yeah, you don't have to.
I'm old-fashioned.
Yeah. You're. But that's
it's the way that
how
people
you were
are doing it now.
Raised and trained. Yeah. So people can do PDF copies, but maybe like a little notepad, even if it's digital, of what you were finding, what your notes are, what hiccups you've run into, what roadblocks, and then so that you can set it aside and pick it back up again in a week.
I did this for all my generations. So I have all the documentation that I have going back X number of generations.
Sure, yeah.
For all of this. And I've numbered everybody. I've got 127 people.
Okay.
And this is only going back 7 generations.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is kind of crazy.
That's amazing though, right?
Yeah, it is.
It is. I don't think you've been given a bunch of credit over the years for the amount of work you've done and put into it.
Well,
only because it's your journey, not maybe everybody else's journey.
Exactly.
And you're not doing it for everybody else. You're doing it for you.
For myself.
For sure. But I think it has picked up some speed. You know Connor, my younger one, he's always been full in.
He has ever since grade school.
Grade school. Yeah. But that's been Connor. Connor likes to talk about the wars and the history. He's been very, very engaged in what's happened in the past.
He's the one that'll probably end up getting
probably
this.
This is probably gonna be all kind of stuff. But I think I want you to know that I certainly appreciate all the hard work that you've done, and this matters. This we're global, right? We're a global society now. That's just the day we live, the day and age that we live in.
Yeah.
But we're still tribal. Like everybody likes their tribe. Yeah. Everybody. And it doesn't mean we can't understand somebody else, and it doesn't mean we can't sympathize, empathize, and be gracious with each other. It just hits a little differently when you know it's your tribe.
Yeah, it does.
Like, why do I like this thing? And then you go back, you're like, oh gosh, yeah, we're back
to
we're back to the Viking Age, and we're back to the Scottish traditions and the Irish traditions. And it's like, well. No shit. No wonder I love this.
It's getting back to my roots.
Getting back to my roots. Yeah. And it's that tribal. I belong to a tribe. I belong to a group, and it's no matter how global we become, which is amazing. I love that we have a global society right now, and it's only going to continue. I think to get better.
Oh, I do too. I agree.
But we still like our tribe. We just do.
And it's interesting. Our tribe is much bigger than we realize. I think too.
True.
Most of us grow up thinking that our family. Our parents and our grandparents, and that's it.
Right.
Most people don't really expand it beyond that.
Right.
But it took hundreds of people to make our grandparents.
Right.
And that they're all part of the tribe too.
That's it. But that's where I think it's still a tribe, but it expands our our own horizons of,
Oh, absolutely.
hey, no, I'm not a California girl. This goes back and back, and all of a sudden we're in the Revolutionary War. And now we're back to Scotland fighting in battles like.
And some of my friends, obviously I've got some friends that have like interests.
Sure. Yes. Shocking.
What a shock is that?
That's your tribe.
But we were talking about where our ancestors came from,
Yes.
just within our history here in the U.S.
Yeah.
And they said, you don't have anybody in the South? And I said, no. Yeah. Everybody's New England. It's all original
Yes.
colonies.
Yeah.
And they said, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding. And I said, no. Yeah. And then they branched out from there.
Right.
But
there's no Southern.
But there's not one.
Mom, I literally, so the recordings with Taylor and Connor, and I know you will sympathize with me on this one. When they start drinking, they get that stupid ass Southern accent.
Oh, I've heard it.
Where
Taylor did in 8th grade.
No, he did not.
Don't you remember they were doing that play?
But is that where did this cut? They've been doing it forever, and it's when they start jacking around and messing around and doing stuff, they get this. Oh my gosh, like
it's hysterical.
They
should do it with a New England twang
instead. But yeah, there's no Southern ties in our line at all.
No.
Oh my gosh.
I love it.
Okay, so we have a lot to continue talking about.
Wow.
I'm going to give a nice little break right now for the listeners, and then we are going to pick up next week getting into the more spiritual side of exploring our lineage, our heritage, and our genealogy, and then tying that in specifically to the month of October.
I love it.
And our dumb supper, which I'm so excited about.
Oh, I am.
It's only like a couple weeks away. You're already planning?
Oh,
okay.
Yes.
So keep those notes, save those thoughts.
Okay, I will.
We're going to add it into next week. So for listeners, if you would like to hold on, I'm going to go, actually don't have a poem for today. I'm going to save that for next week to kind of tie both episodes together. But I do have the moon update and then just some general housekeeping things to review. So I'm going to grab those notes and I will be right back. Well, that worked out perfectly. It was a great spot to put a nice little pause on the recording, and it gives me the opportunity to now do a summary for you. So, as Mom said, baby steps, right? This is a marathon, not a sprint. So take your time when researching and doing your own personal genealogical work. Step number 1 is going to be to start with you, with your own birth certificate. Step 2, get your biological mother's birth certificate and get your biological father's birth certificate. You're going to do the same step with your mother's cert and get her biological father's birth certificate and her biological mother's birth certificate. Step 4, duplicate that same process with your father's birth certificate. These certificates are important. They have all the data that you need on them, listing your mother's legal name, your birth mother's legal name, your birth father's legal name, and where they are from. So doing those first 4 steps is going to provide you with 7 names now, right? You, your parents, and then both sets of grandparents. And more than likely, you'll have pretty easy-ish, air quotes-ish, access to those first 7 names. From there, you're going to continue building your tree and branching out. Now, the resources available to you to help support your research are going to be, first, use the general genealogy websites. Those are ancestry.com, familysearch.org, myheritage.com, findmypast.com, genealogybank.com, and genie.com. Mom also added one in there called findgrave.com. Second one is going to be adding DNA testing if you choose to go down this road. You have 3 pretty good options here. First one, that is what we chose to do, is with ancestry.com. They have Ancestry DNA. Second one is 23andMe. That one I think focuses maybe a little bit more on the health aspect, but definitely gives you your coding. And then there's also one called living DNA. Third area to focus on to help and support your research is going to be more region-specific resources, right? I mentioned British and Irish records. That's going to be the National Archives in UK, scotlandspeople.gov, irishgenealogy.ie. There are Jewish, Jewish-specific resources. That is jewishgen.org. I believe there's also a resource for those researching ancestors that were specifically affected by the Holocaust too. There is, region-specific genealogy for African American research. That is afrigenus.com. I believe also the Freedmen's Bureau of Records. It's a family search is available. You've got Indigenous people of the Americas. That's going to be accessgenealogy.com. Certainly the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the BIA, is a good resource. You've got other ones, so whatever specific area, look and see if there is something to support it. There's PolishRoots.org. There is Family Search, more focused on Latin America. MexicanGenealogy.info. There's a Brazil genealogy group. There's ChineseAncestry.com, JapanGenWeb.org. There's also one more focused on Korean genealogy for guide and research. And then we also mentioned possibly looking into maybe Ellis Island. There's a data, it's literally called ellisisland.org. That is a free resource for tracing. You just have to be careful. It might not be completely accurate as far as, like the names and how they were spelled. There's one called Cindy's List, which really is a comprehensive directory of genealogy websites that you can tap into. Mom mentioned using fold3.com, fold3.com. This really specializes in military records. And then you've got the National Archives. But more than anything, if you get stuck, you hit a wall, go to your local resources, right? Your local libraries and historical societies. Many local libraries and historical societies maintain collections of historical records, including like city directories, local newspapers, and land records, right? I said it, there's no reason to recreate the wheel. So tap into your local resources and see if they can help. Okay. Woo! Thank you, Mom. Thank you. I am super excited to continue on with the recording. Next week, we do jump into the spiritual side of genealogical work, and again, continuing with Judy, my mom, and her wealth of knowledge. I've just had so much fun creating these two episodes for you guys. So if you are listening to this in real time, now for my Patreon members, it is going to be available on Sunday. For my regular listeners, this podcast airs every Wednesday. So for Wednesday, October 9th, our moon is waxing. We just had our new moon in October and Friday, and now she is gaining strength. She's getting bigger and stronger. And as she is picking up her momentum, so can we. I am personally going to be using all of this nice energy to get all of my Q3 work done and some additional work for our family here at Witchy Work Wishes. So I hope you have an amazing week and weekend, and I will talk with you next week on part 2 of Tracing Your Ancestral Roots with Genealogy. Thank you for joining me today at Witchy Work Wishes, a place to find your weekly inspiration for bringing your personal witchcraft practice into your business, work, and office. For more information and additional content, please visit me online at witchyworkwishes.com. If you want to send me a personal note, please email me at info@witchyworkwishes.com. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Witchy Work Wishes.